All right, good morning, everybody. We are amazingly getting close to the end here. So we have, today we have Friday, we have Monday of next week, so Thanksgiving break, and then we have a whole week. Okay, so what our plan is we'll cover chapters 9, which we already covered, we're kind of done with that, right? I have that quiz due when? I can't remember. Monday, okay. So we'll also cover chapter 7, we'll start that today, which is information systems for competitive advantage, and we'll talk about that. We'll cover chapter 8 as well, which is social media information systems. And that's probably all we will do. Okay, so our next exam will be our final exam, and it will not be cumulative. It will be just like the other exams. It'll be on chapters 7, 8, 9. So it'll be 3 chapters, just like the other exams. And it is scheduled for Monday, December 5th at 8 a.m. I think we kick off finals week, right? That's the first day of finals. That's us. That's here. So good. That doesn't cause any issues with travel plans. If people were leaving, and you're going to get out of here quite quickly. So, any questions about that? So I got to go back and make sure. I think all our article presentations are done, but I don't have them all graded. I got to go back and do that, go on the grades, kind of get all the grades up to date before that time comes. Maybe I'll use the Thanksgiving break for that, just so that we're all on the same page. Any questions about where we're at? All right, so let's move on then, and we're going to move to chapter 7. So we're moving back, and I like this chapter because it's kind of foundational, right? It kind of talks about, well, what are we doing here in the world of business? Like, why are information systems important? And not just important, but like, what is the baseline? Like, what do they improve? What are processes? What do we do with organizations and information systems? So this really, we talked about competitive advantage, and this chapter really speaks to like how in the business world we use systems to create competitive advantage. We do things more efficiently and more effectively, okay? So a couple things. We're going to talk about processes, right? So you think about it, in the business world, when you own an organization, there are processes, right? There are processes that we do at St. Francis, processes that you go through, like scheduling your classes, processes like this course, processes like you want to buy a book, processes, you want to drop a class. All those things are processes, right? And if we do processes efficiently and effectively, we add value, right? We add value. So this is a business process where a customer wants to order something. They check inventory, they check the customer credit, they approve special terms, and it's a process. It has to happen. So a couple things though, before we even, we know that businesses derive value by processes, turning, raw materials, if it's a manufacturing, turning raw materials like steel and glass into automobiles. That's how, General Motors makes money, right? So we know that. But let's talk about processes. Okay, let's talk just at the basic level about what a process is and how we can define them. First off, we can define processes as either structured processes versus dynamic processes. Okay, so what do you think we mean by that? What do you think determines if a process is structured versus it's dynamic? What do you think some of the attributes are for structured versus dynamic processes? What are they? So how do I know that a process is structured versus dynamic? Come on, what are, give me an example. Daniel?
I feel like dynamic would be more like flexible, structure is very set in stone, like nothing changes while dynamic changes the environment?
Okay, so very dynamic would be, I guess we could use the word fluid, right? You said no changes to the environment. So if we think about a structured process like an ATM transaction is a highly structured process, isn't it? You think about it. And why is it structured? There's nothing changing in the environment. So we think about it, why is that? It's the same flow, we can design it out. What are some of the things that make it structured though? You know, why when I go to the ATM it's the same as Will and same as, we might do different things, but it's the same process. What are some of the things that make it a structured process though? So well-defined, for example, the process, if I go to the ATM, or Will goes to the ATM, or Randall goes to the ATM, the same process happens, right? You put in your card, it comes up the screen, you put in your PIN, you select your transactions, we can bullet point that. The other thing is, how many choices do we have here with that ATM transaction? There's not a lot of choices, right? So the other thing is standardized choices. How about over here? We said fluid. What do you think about this? Like a fluid process would be, if you came into my office and wanted to drop a class, hey, that's a highly structured process, right? We can knock that out in a few minutes. Here's the form, you sign here, I sign here, we put this in. But if you say, come into my office and you say, Dr. Miko, I don't know what I want to be in my life, right? Like I don't know where I want to be in 5 years or 10 years. That's a fluid process. It's not well defined how that conversation flows. There's a lot of options, okay? These are all characteristics of standardized or structured and dynamic process. So if you think about it, support operational and structured manual decision activities. They're standardized, usually formally defined and documented. Exceptions are rare, not well tolerated. Process structure changes slowly and with organizational agony. Customer returns, order entries, purchasing, payroll. Right? Sometimes you go into these situations and people say, yeah, we have a process for that. This is what we do. Right? Well defined. We do that all the time. Dynamic processes. These are operational. Remember we talked back in, I can't remember what chapter it was, but strategic and management decisions. Less specific, fluid, usually informal. Exceptions are frequent and expected. Activate process, change structure rapidly and readily. Collaboration, social network, ill-defined, ambiguous situations, right? So a couple things. So I'm going to give you a little example here. We'll go through it. And I want you to tell me if this is a structured process or more of a dynamic process and why. Okay, so get out a piece of paper. And I'll talk, there's going to be some parts of this process that are highly structured, right? So a sequential process we're going to follow through. So I want you to do this. Think of a number from 1 to 10. Any number from 1 to 10. Okay, so kind of well defined, right? I gave you some bounds. I said 1 to 10. You have what 10 choices there. That's it. Kind of structure. 1 to 10. Write that down. Write that number down. All right, more structure. Multiply that number by 9. Okay. If that number is a 2-digit number, okay, add the digits together. So whatever those 2 digits are, if it's just a 1-digit number, leave it alone. Okay. Now subtract 5. Add those 2 numbers together to get 9, right? Subtract 5. So pretty structured, right? But hopefully you arrived at different values, right? Because we started this process with a random number and did some math to it. And I want you to use a little table up here. So you guys all have a number, right? You guys have a number. So I built a little alphabet table. You guys probably thought you were learning the alphabet today, right? You remember that? When you guys went, when you guys went to elementary school, is that like at the top of the chalkboard where they have the letters and stuff like that? Did they have it in cursive as well? Mm-hmm. Do you guys learn cursive? We're going away from that, right? No more? Yeah. Yeah, there's still some letters I don't like. A Q. Ask me to make a Q, I'll struggle the hell with that. You know what I mean? Like a capital Q. I don't know. It looks like a 2, doesn't it?
I don't know either.
Yeah. So.
I just make it look fancy if I don't know what it is.
Yeah. All right. So this is a little table, right? So whatever your number is, there's a letter assigned to that number. So if you got a 11, you're going to take a K, right? You're a K. If you got a 14, you're an N. 2B, 3C, 4D. You got it, right? So we got to translate numbers to letters. Now here's where we get more choices, right? More choices. So you have a letter. I want you to think of a country that starts. That's 9, but that's 4. Now think of a country that starts with that letter. You know what I'm saying? Like if you got C, it's Canada, or B, Belgium. You know what I'm talking about? You guys good? All right. Now take that country that you got. All right. Think of a country. You can't think of a country? All right. That's all right. Okay. Think of something. Google it. I don't know. Now circle the last letter of that country. Okay, circle the last letter of that country. And think of an animal that starts with that letter. So if it was, I don't know, if you said Canada, A, alligator, right? You know what I'm talking about? All right. Now take the last letter of that animal, circle it. And now think of a fruit that starts with that letter. Okay, now, so think about that process. Kind of structured, right? I gave you steps to follow, but, the choice is somewhat standardized, but not highly standardized, right? There's a lot of countries, there's a lot of fruits, right? Yes? And there's also a lot of animals, yes? There's a lot of animals. Okay, so what would you say about that process in all together? What would you say about that process altogether? Structured or dynamic, or what? What do you think, Tony?
Structured.
Highly structured? What degree of structure?
Well,
If you had to program that, Tony, how would you program that? If you had to make that an app, could you do that?
probably.
You probably could. But what would you have to do? So what would you have to list in that application? If you wanted to make someone go.
With the values, like a few different.
Okay, right. So that would be pretty easy, yes.
Yeah.
Then you want a country, so provide a drop down with, I don't know how many countries there are in the world. You guys know? 253? Maybe. That's a good exact answer for maybe. You think about the animals, there's a lot of animals, there's thousands of animals. And then fruits, there's a lot of fruit as well. Okay? So we could say kind of structured, but kind of dynamic as well. 196 countries, that's it? Huh. All right, so Tim, under your desk, there's an envelope under your desk. All right. Yeah, this is where the magic happens. So I want you to open that envelope, Tim. I want you to read it out loud.
You are thinking of a kangaroo in Denmark being.
All right.
That's pretty good.
What kind of sorcery?
Yeah. So I don't know how many people had that answer. How many people had those three things? It's not going to be all, but probably over 50%. And there's a reason for that. It's kind of, you didn't have it, Matt? What did you have? Oh, you went with Djibouti. That's awesome. That's the greatest name for a country ever. You guys know DGI of Djibouti? That's how you say it too. And there's Dominican Republic, right? So what happens is the way that process works. It's not magic. If you think about it, that if you did the math right, and I know some of you didn't, but if you did the math right, that should always come out to 4. So what seemed like an unstructured process, like I randomly let you pick a number, but then by doing that math, it should came out to 4, right? So you didn't know this, but you all got funneled to 4 if you did your math right, which hopefully you did, which is D, right? And there's only, I think, 3 countries in the world that start with D, or maybe 4. Djibouti, Dominican Republic, Dominica, I think. But the one we know, because we're a European central kind of education, was Denmark. That's the one we think of, right? And then Denmark ends in K, and there's K animals, there's koalas, and what else is there? There's probably other things. Kiwis, is that an animal or a fruit? I don't know. But the thing that we are taught, like in alphabet, like when we're young, and you get the alphabet card, like, you know, A is for apple, and B is for, I don't know what B usually for, but K is usually kite or kangaroo. So you obviously, you know, and then O, you're like, oh, struggling for fruit for O. There's other ones, but orange is. So those are, so you think about it, what seemed like not a lot of options, seemed like a lot of options, became kind of a standardized choice. And that's how, I was able to guess 50% of yours, without knowing anything about you, right? So that happens in the business world as well. There are so many processes that may look unstructured, may look like there's a lot of choices, but a lot of people take the same path, right? And if you think about it, when we talk about an ATM transaction, what is that path that most people do? And they say, well, since this is the path that most people do, let's make that the easiest damn path. The path that if you don't do it when you're in front of me, I get pissed. If I'm at the ATM and you don't take this path, I'm like, come on. Fast cash, right? When someone's like transferring funds and stuff like that at the ATM, I'm like, you are missing the point of the ATM, right? It is for fast cash and get the heck out. Get your $60 or $80 and get out. So that's what we try to do in organizations. We try to take processes and say, what is going to handle most of them? So one way we do this with processes is we define their structure versus dynamic. The other thing, God bless you, the other thing we look at when we talk about process, and this is probably more important to the business term, is processes also vary by organizational scope. Okay, organizational scope means where they happen within an organization. So we're going to talk about 3 levels of organizational scope. And the first one are work group examples. Okay, work group examples, if you think about work groups, I want you to think about departments. Okay, so there are processes that happen in the business world that are kind of self-contained in a department. For example, if we're sales and marketing, these are processes that we perform. Lead generation, lead tracking, customer management, sales forecasting. And we really don't have to go outside of our department to get those processes done. If we are customer service, order tracking, account tracking, customer support. If we're human resource and recruiting, compensation. So these are all processes that are kind of self-contained. And because of that, because they are processes that are geared toward our department, we employ something called, I don't know if it's on the next slide or not, we employ something called functional information systems, okay, or sometimes called work group information systems, okay, a lead generation information system, a staffing information system, an order tracking information system, a scheduling, manufacturing scheduling information system. It's very related to a process inside a department, right? It's very specific to a process. Maybe a general ledger system for accounting in the accounting department. So these are examples. We call these things that are geared toward just a work group in an organization. We call it a functional information system. It can also be called a work group information system or a functional application. It's an information system geared toward one part of an organization, one department, if you will. Usually not a whole lot of users, maybe 10 or 100 users. Procedures are often very formalized. Work groups can duplicate data, somewhat difficult to change. But like a doctor's office at a medical practice, they have maybe scheduling software that they use at your dentist office. That would be an example of a work group information system. The next level up is processes can be enterprise. Okay, and anytime you hear the word enterprise, that's a kind of a fancy business word for the whole organization, right? Doesn't matter if it's a nonprofit, it's a for-profit, if it's healthcare, whatever. Enterprise, St. Francis University is an enterprise. So an enterprise system means it touches multiple departments in the system. So if you think about it, there are processes that do that. For example, they mentioned a hospital. A good example of this would be when a patient checks out. Okay, that process touches multiple departments. What departments would it touch when a patient checks out? Who needs to know? Who needs to be part of that process when a patient checks out of the hospital? What departments of the hospital need to be part of that process? Have buy-in, to be communicated to, maybe set something, nothing? Who needs to know you're checking out of the hospital? Who needs to be notified? What departments internally in the hospital? Come on.
Billing.
Okay, billing for sure. What else? Who else? The medical staff. Well, who else? Yes? Okay, so yeah, billing and insurance probably kind of related, right? I'm thinking internal in the hospital. That's kind of when we talk about insurance, we're going outside our enterprise. We're going outside the hospital. Maybe we're talking about Duke, UPMC or something like that. We're going to like Highmark, okay? So that's kind of inter-enterprise. But what else in the hospital you're checking out? How about, what do you call the people that, like your room but that staff, you think about it, the food services, know that you're not there anymore. Maybe someone from customer service gives you a survey. How was your stay, right? So all of those things have to be coordinated from multiple departments, right? Multiple departments have to come together for that process to happen. And when we talk about inter-enterprise, that's probably a good example of inter-enterprise. Okay, when you go to a medical staff and you have a service performed, they need to keep track of it internally, but they also need to communicate with your insurance company, Highmark, Cigna, United Healthcare, whoever it might be. So those processes tend to be a lot more complicated, right? Medicare, Medicaid, and that's why the healthcare system is very, very convoluted, because you think about these kind of systems, hey, they're in 10, maybe 100 people, internal processes, we can solve things ourselves. Enterprise, a little more difficult, and you kind of see that. Enterprise processes maybe fall apart a little bit more, right? Like, oh, hey, we didn't know, billing didn't know that you were checking out, or the dining didn't know you were checking out, so there's a meal for Dr. Amico, and he's not here anymore. And when we talk about inter-enterprise, these processes are even more difficult, right? More difficult to manage because, it's not just contained in your organization. Okay? And healthcare and insurance would be a good example of that. And why it's so convoluted and complex and why things break down. If you remember when the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare came out, you remember they built that website? Do you remember the website that they built and it didn't work? Do you guys remember this a couple years ago maybe? And it didn't work for a couple days, and it had a lot of flaws, and they had to it was a big embarrassment for President Obama. Well, there were a lot of issues with that, right? It was not just the government, but they had to coordinate with all kind of insurance providers, and it was very complex, and it did not work very well, okay? So when we talk about, processes, we can define them as very structured, very dynamic, and we can also define them by how they're contained, the scope of the organization, work group, enterprise, just the organization itself, or inter-enterprise. And the reason we do that, and why we're talking about processes, is we are trying to use information systems to do something called process efficiency process effectiveness, and process quality. So let's talk about those three things. I think I think people a lot of times use efficiency and effectiveness as the same thing, right? They say, oh, it's very efficient, very effective. They're different. They're much different things. What is efficiency versus effectiveness? What is efficiency versus effectiveness? Yes. Okay, so very good. Efficient is doing things, I like to say it this way, efficient is doing things the right way, right? Doing it, and the book says the ratio of outputs to inputs is a good one, right? You're not putting in a lot of effort and getting a lot of output, right? So you could be very efficiently doing something, but it's not effective, right? You're doing it fast, you're not putting a lot of effort into it, but it's not effective. Why? Because it's not supporting the organizational structure. So if you think about it this way, efficiency is doing things right, but effectiveness is doing the right things, right? Doing the things that supports the mission, right? You could be very efficiently doing something, but well, hell, that does not help the process, right? You're knocking that out, but it doesn't help what we're trying to accomplish, right? So what we want to do with information systems is, we want both of these levels, right? We want efficient and effective process. We want to be doing the right things, which that is coming from the organizational strategy, and we want to be doing it the best way possible. And that is really where information systems can come in. So how do we do that? Okay, how do we improve processes? How do think about base processes? One of the things we can do is change the process structure. What does that mean? What does that mean? Change the process structure. What does that mean? Let's use the structure. I know I've talked about this process before. But you guys drop and add classes. So let's just talk about you drop a class. Okay? You want to drop a class. You're in Dr. Miko's MIS class. Let's say you want to withdraw from my class. It's 10 weeks in, 5 weeks in, and you hate me, you hate the class, and you want to withdraw from it, right? That's the process. What kind of process is that first? Is it structured or unstructured? It's structured, right? And the structure is kind of contained how? How is the structure contained? Like, you don't need to be trained on that because that structure is kind of encapsulated how? How's that structure encapsulated? That form basically says, hey, here is the process, right? You put your name in here, you put your student ID here, you put your date here, you get these 6 signatures, right? You know what I'm saying? That process is there. So change the process structure. So if we wanted that to be more efficient process, how can we change that structure? How can we change that structure? And I'm not talking about technology at this point, just how can we change that structure to make it more efficient? What can we do to make that more efficient? Okay, and as you think about it, Blake, all right, you're an athlete, right? So you're a student athlete, so you want to withdraw from a class. What is that structure? So you say, hey, you make the decision, I want to withdraw from MIS102. Your next step is you go to your advisor, right? And you fill out that form and you sign it, your advisor signs it. What else do you need done? Okay, you have to get the athletics office to sign it. I think if you're an education major, there's also some, I don't know why, there's some damn signature on that, the form for that, I can bring up the form. But you also, because it's withdrawal, you need the instructor to sign it, yes? So you think about that process, okay? Is it an efficient process? Is it an efficient process? You think about it. All we want to do is remove this class. You have to get your signature, the advisor's signature, the instructor's signature, and you need to get 4 signatures. And then you need to take it over to the registrar's office, right? Sneaker net it over there, right? So is that an efficient process, would you say? No, it's not, okay? What could you do to make it more efficient? I'm not talking about technology yet. What could you do to make it more efficient? All right, so we can eliminate steps, right? we can eliminate steps. We could say athletics doesn't need a sign. Trust the advisor to know that athletics wants to sign because they're worried that I'm going to let you go below 12 credits and then you're not going to be eligible, right? Well, screw that. Trust me. I know more than you do, right? So trust the advisor. How about the registrar step? Give me the power to just withdraw you from that class, right? Give me, as your advisor, the power to withdraw you from that class. So we can change the process structure so that it's easier, right? We could also do things with technology to change that structure. So that is just changing like the steps or the sign-offs, all those things. There's a thing in the business world called BPR. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of BPR. It's called Business Process Reengineering, right? It's not PBR like Pabst Blue Ribbon. It's BPR, Business Process. We take a process and we re-engineer it. We say, we go through all these steps and we start questioning what value does that step add? What value does that step add? What if we eliminate that step? So we don't try to we obliterate the process. We say let's say, does this really add any value, right? And we can do things more efficiently that way. How about when we talk about that, change process resources? Well, that's probably not a great one to talk about, that structure. But change process resources, what do you think that means? What do you think change process resources? Let's think about a process of, I don't know, let's think of something physical, a physical process. I don't know, we want to dig a ditch, right? That's a process, right? That's a business process. We want to, I don't know, we want to lay some pipe from the pine bowl up to the swamp, right? So we want to dig a ditch from here to the pine bowl. And I say, Kyle, do that. All right. How do we make that process more efficient? By adding resources. All right, so one thing is better tools, right? Let's say instead of a shovel, here's a backhoe, right? That's one thing. By adding more tools to that process, I can improve that process. And think about technology, information systems, or tools. What else could you do to it? What else could you do to it? Not just be Kyle and a backhoe, but what else? More people. I could say, all right, Mr. Boyd's coming down with you, and Mr. McCord, and Aubrey, and Taylor, and we put more people on it, right? So process resource, or we could change both. So if I think about it, how can process be improved? Information systems allow a lot of that to happen, okay? They allow a lot of that to happen. So if I think about, let's digging a ditch, let's hold off on that. But let's think about the drop ad slip. How would I use information systems to change that process so that it was both more efficient and maybe not more effective, because maybe the end result is you still get out of that class, but more efficient? How could I change that process? How could I change that process using an information system? What could I allow to happen? What would be the best way if I'm starting that process from scratch? And let me have, the form is not the best way. If I had to design that process from scratch, how would you design that process? Malik wants to withdraw from MIS102. What's the best way to do that? Using an information system as the driver. Come on. What would Malik do first? Now. Yes.
Like have them on like board for it? Is that what you mean?
Better than that, yeah. Okay, I like it, but he knows what his classes are, right? Okay, so if you think about it, if I were designing this from scratch, right? Here's Malik's schedule. Here's his classes, right? This is MIS 102. And he goes in through My Francis. You can view your schedule, right, Malik? Okay. Little drop down beside MIS 102, and one of the options under is request withdrawal, right? I've had enough of MECO, had enough of that class. I'm going to request the withdrawal. Now what? So you've made that decision. Now what? So we want to still get everyone sign in or buy in. Let's not change the structure. Let's just use the tool better. So now what happens? Okay. So you think about the form, the paper form, very sequential in that you come to my office, I sign it, you walk over, John Krimmel or Dasha signs it. If you're an education major, I guess you go down there, they sign it. You try to find the instructor, they sign it. And then finally you go to the registrar's office and they oh, you got all the signatures, fantastic. Congratulations, I'll drop you from that class, right? Very sequential. So the big change here, the big change to the process structure facilitated or made possible by information systems is at the same time, this goes to your advisor, who may or may not be, it goes to the instructor. It goes to, it determines, hey, is Malik a student athlete? Because that's in our system. Oh yeah, he is. So if yes, if student athlete, it goes to, I don't know, John Krimmel. And if he's an education major, I don't know, they have some deal as well. If you're an education major, it goes to whoever hell education chair is, ed chair. Okay, at the same time, and these 3 people or these 4 people basically get a notification, right? And what would that notification look like on their end? So at the same time this happens, right? It's not SneakerNet. What would that look like on their end? You need to notify them, and this is probably where email comes in play. Whatever the primary work communication flow is, maybe it's email, maybe it's a pop-up in My Francis. I don't know. We don't really work in there, but somewhere where these people work, they get a notification. What does that look like? What does that look like? What does that look like? Come on. We design a system from scratch. What does that look like? Tim?
Maybe like a link to My Francis to see like who signed off on it, and they can sign off on it.
Okay, so definitely some kind of link, right, that says Malik Duncan is requesting to withdraw from MIS102, blah, blah, blah. These people have been notified at this point. Maybe we could see that, this person signed off on it, this person signed off on it. And if I want to sign off on it, I click a button, right? Because I'm authenticated as John Miko, I'm logged in as John Miko. It's the same as my signature, yes? And maybe even an option like sometimes these things are, I'm not going to sign off on this until, the instructor signs off on it. I don't know if that really happens, but if we needed that flow, we could do that. We could say, I approve as long as this person approves, right? So at the same time, everyone gets this link. And then when everyone has checked off on it, right? Everyone has checked off on it. What happens then automatically? It's gone, right? And then, so it's gone from your schedule. You get a confirmation email. Maybe your advisor does. I don't know. Maybe anyone that wants to get it. Maybe all 4 people get a confirmation email that says, hey, Malik Duncan successfully dropped MIS102. He's now down to 12 credits. Something like that, right? So think about that process, right? And I know we don't care about efficiency of you withdrawing from class. That's not like a differentiating factor, right, at all. You didn't come to St. Francis because, hey, it's really easy to withdraw from classes, right? The admissions officer didn't tell you that. But if you think about it, what happened now over here, there was a registrar person involved that you had to walk the form to, and she or he had to go in the system and do it, take 5-10 minutes at a time. I think they even take that damn form and file it away, which is bullshit, right? Because we don't. That's the process. This is why we did it, because now that form is in here, right? So they file that away. So let's say it's a half hour's worth of work on the registrar side. So Malik's not the only one that withdraws from a class, right? We have hundreds of people withdrawing from a class. So what does that mean to the organization? What does that mean to the organization? Not that, hey, Malik was able to withdraw, easier process. What does it mean to the organization? Just neat? It's neat? Oh, it's a neater process. Because we really don't care about the convenience of you withdrawing from a class. Faster, great, that's good. Fantastic, great. But what do we care about? Yeah, the successful. But what's the main thing though? Efficiency. Yeah, it's efficient, but what? Because it was more efficient, it's effective. Both end up dropping the damn class, right? This is more efficient. And where do we suck out, as an organization, do we suck out value? What could you imagine happening if you're Ohio State, where it's not just 100 Maliks dropping, where there's thousands of Maliks withdrawn from the class? I guarantee you Ohio State doesn't use this process to withdraw from the class. Guaranteed they don't. I don't know anything, but I guarantee they don't. Why not? What's the most expensive resource in 99% of organizations? If you look at expense, and it's true at St. Francis, if you look at expenses at St. Francis University, if you look at expenses at Google, if you look at expenses at a hospital, if you look at expenses at almost any organization you can name, what is the biggest slice of the pie? Human resources. So, I know you don't like to say it, right? This is people, right? People are your most important resource. They're also your most expensive resource. So if you think about that, what can I do if I make this process more efficient? Maybe some other process is more efficient. We used to have to walk up to the registrar's office as a faculty member and give them our grades, and then they would manually enter them in. Okay? Now, still not an efficient process. I have your grades in Blackboard, I have to re-enter them in another system. So now they push to work on the professor, fine, I don't care. But what would be ideal is if from Blackboard it just automatically uploaded to our Genzabar system. Wouldn't that be ideal? Then I don't have to, no human gets involved. But say we make this process more efficient. We make scheduling, which we did make scheduling more efficient. What can eventually happen is you can reduce or reuse or reallocate human resources in the organization, right? And that saves you money, right? We don't care that it was a better process for Malik. We don't care about that. Guarantee you Ohio State doesn't have that process. Guaranteed they don't. Penn State doesn't have that paper process. They have, because they can't, right? Because if they have that paper process, they need to hire 5, 6 other people, and they're like, hey, that's $500,000 a year. That's just ridiculous for something we could design, some kind of form, some information system we could design that takes us $50,000 to eliminate $500,000 of salary a year. Does this make sense? So that's what information systems help us do. Not eliminate people. I don't want you to think about that, but that's why we try to capture that efficiency, because it means, we can reduce expenses. And if you think about it, people say, well, that's not nice because you're getting rid of people. True, you're reallocating people, but what does that mean to you as the student? As the customer, if you will? If we're able to reduce expenses, what does that mean? Yeah, right? Maybe we're nonprofit, right? So we really can't make a profit. So whatever our expenses are kind of have to match our revenue, yes? So if our expenses are less, that means less tuition. And what does that make us? If our tuition goes down, how about for St. Francis University? What does that make us? What? Yeah, more competitive, right? So if you think about it, I know this is like a little shitty process that happens at St. Francis. It is. Drawing from a class is a little crappy process, right? But if you think about it, we took that little crappy process and we said, this is what it affects, and this is what it means, and we said, hey, that makes us more competitive in the marketplace. Does that make sense? And that's a process that, enrollment management's not talking about, and they shouldn't talk about it, right? No one cares, oh, you have a good one, but think about that. So, we can do that if we can drive down expenses through the use of information systems, everything is better, right? And that's the beauty. When you see why are things that, relatively speaking, you can go to Walmart and the amount of things you can buy, for such a small price is amazing. Do you ever buy anything from a Walmart or a big box store and you're like, that's a lot of value for $10. You know what I mean? I think, holy shit, I couldn't make that thing for $100. You know what I mean? Did you ever think about that? The reason for that, if you think about it, is It's all down the chain. Walmart uses very, very efficient processes to move their goods and services. They require that they're manufactured, that value is driven down, and that's why you're able to get a good or service. You're like, wow, this is ridiculously cheap, right? It's like transformed a lot of industries. Like, used to be like to get a legal, I mean, this is a stupid example, but to get a legal document, like a will, right? You'd have to go to a lawyer, and you're talking $400 or $500 for the lawyer to draft that. Now you can use like LegalZoom and get it done for like $25, and it's just as good, right? There's no reason you need a lawyer. It's kind of a template thing unless you have some ridiculous amount of assets. Yes. There used to be like life insurance, right? Life insurance used to be about 5 times more expensive than it is now. And the reason for that was there was an information imbalance. Like, the people selling insurance, knew more about it than the people buying it. But because of the internet, we have sites like SelectQuote where they say, you tell us your results, and we'll act as a broker, and we'll go out and negotiate the best deal for you. And we know, right? We know it. So you don't have to be an expert at things, right? Information systems, made those processes more effective, right? More effective as well. Made us better. So I'm going to end there. I know I got kind of on a rant, but I hope you can see that that's why, even though you're a business major, you might be a marketing major, an accounting major, a finance major, an econ major, it doesn't matter. Information systems is going to be a part of you making decisions to drive value for your customer, for your company, to make you more competitive. All right, I'm done. I'll see you Friday. Have a good day.